This is Biology 1, Chapter 11 on Complex Inheritance and Human Heredity, Part 2. In this portion of the video lecture, we will go over some different complex patterns of inheritance that are fairly unlike Mendel's pea plants. So this part will be a little more applicable and make a little more sense because these are types of patterns that we see more so in animals. Incomplete dominance is a situation where blending takes place. Not all traits are inherited like Mendel's pea plants. Nothing is ever just tall or just short or just yellow or just green. In some cases, you can have tall and short making medium. And a lot of human traits are inherited this way. So incomplete dominance happens when the heterozygous phenotype will blend between the dominant and the recessive phenotype. We use all capital letters in incomplete dominance, which is slightly different from your book because your textbook has a little bit of an old school way of doing this, plus it's very confusing if you were to just look at a problem in the textbook and know if it was incomplete dominance or regular single trait dominant and recessive. So we'll use what I call ticks or marks, whatever you want to call them. So it's a little bit different than the book, but it will be a lot easier to understand when we do our genetics problems. So if I was to take a type of flower, it's called a snapdragon. A red snapdragon, which we will have as big R, and a white snapdragon, which will be the recessive. We will use R tick to notice the recessiveness there. So red and white should make pink. So for the monohybrid square, you can see one R, the plain R, goes in one box, and the R tick parent goes up along the upper part. So we have R tick R, which will mean that that's a blending, and that's how you'll know that that's incomplete dominance for problems. Co-dominance is where both alleles will be equally expressed when they are together. Co-dominance, think of being like a co-captain for a team or a co-advisor. You share those duties. So the dominance is shared by both alleles. An example of this is sickle cell disease, which mainly affects folks of African American descent. What ends up happening is the red blood cell, the proteins on the surface of the red blood cell have a little bit different of a shape in sickle cell than they do in regular blood transportation. So sickle-shaped cells can't transport oxygen and hemoglobin effectively. And so they look kind of like a weird looking banana. The sickle shape comes from the instrument that's used kind of by, unfortunately, the Grim Reaper, kind of a big Sith sickle that he carries. It's sharp and pointy, and so these red blood cells kind of behave in that same manner. In small capillaries, they can get clogged and plugged. They don't move very well, and they can't transport as much oxygen molecules on the surface as regular red blood cells. What's interesting in different countries in Africa, it is actually an advantage to be heterozygous for sickle cell disease. For some reason, they are still kind of researching this out as to the effects of malaria on carriers of sickle cell. If you're a carrier of sickle cell, so if you're heterozygous, you'll have both sickle and normal red blood cells. And that actually prevents people from being infected with malaria, which is a big problem in those countries. So it's actually an advantage to be heterozygous for sickle cell anemia. Multiple alleles are another type of complex inheritance pattern in humans. Multiple alleles means we're going to have multiple forms. So we're going to have traits that actually have more than just 2 forms. Human blood groups is a really good example of this. There are 3 alleles in the human blood groups. We call them markers. They are A, B, and O. A and B are actually co-dominant, and O is recessive. And for the blood groups, the reason why you would be type A, B, AB, or O is because of proteins on the surface of your red blood cell or a lack of proteins on your surface of your red blood cell. So the alleles we call markers, and I am giving you these alleles in your notes. When you do blood group problems, these will be the genotypes that you use. You do not use just A's and B's. They are markers. They are not actual genes themselves. They are used with either a capital I or a lowercase I. Type A blood, rare for double, but you could have capital IA, capital IA. And then most type A folks have one A allele and then one O allele. And because O is recessive, we use that with the lowercase I. Same for B's. You can have a double B blood type. More often than not, you would have a regular B blood type. AB is codominant, so when you have both little proteins stuck on the outside of your red blood cell, then you will be type AB, as well as having the phenotype and genotype being the same. Type O is what we call the universal donor. Folks with type O blood do not have any proteins on the outside of their red blood cell. So type O blood can be given to any person because there isn't any markers of proteins on the red blood cell. I am type O blood. If I were to receive type A blood from somebody, my body would not recognize the A molecule, protein molecule, on the outside of the red blood cell. If something's foreign in my body, my immune system will attack it. So that's why when, for example, during blood donations or even a blood transfusion, you do need to match the blood type, or in some cases, if you can, people that are type A, B, or AB may receive type O blood. Epistasis is another condition in animals that is a complex inheritance pattern. This kind of gives variety where one entire allele hides the effects of another. In Labrador retrievers, you have your yellow labs, white, chocolate, and black labs, all depending on the genotype that they have. There may be no dark pigment present, and that would be the variety of either the yellow or the white, and a dark pigment present would be either the chocolate or the black. Sex determination. The sex chromosomes determine gender. We have already previously talked in our last chapter a little bit about the probability of having a boy or a girl. And as you can see, no matter what way you want to put it, it's always a 50-50 shot every single time. The X chromosome contains a variety of genes for development of males and females. Females have the gender chromosomes XX, and males have the gender chromosomes of XY. So X chromosomes, because both sexes have them, will have genes for development of both males and females. The Y chromosome, on the other hand, because those are exclusive to males, only contain genes for the development of only males. Sex-linked traits are common in the human population. They can be carried on the X or Y chromosome, but we will concentrate on those that are found on the X chromosome. There's a picture there, kind of a size reference of the X chromosome and the Y chromosome. Not much is known about the Y chromosome other than it is what makes males males. There is research going into the Y-linked traits, but we will stick with the X-linked traits since that can be given to either males or females. However, because of the sex determination chromosomes, Males are more often afflicted with sex-linked disorders than females. Okay, males have just one X chromosome, so males cannot be carriers of sex-linked traits. They either have the disorder or the trait, or they are normal. So males cannot be carriers because they just have one X. If they happen to receive a copy of an X from their mother that has a marker for a certain trait or disorder, then that male will automatically have that trait or disorder. Females, however, because there are two X chromosomes there, the second X chromosome can act like a buffer. So females can be carriers of sex-linked traits. A very common sex-linked trait is red-green color blindness. So there would be some deficiencies in seeing these shades of colors. We will, for all sex-linked traits, use the sex chromosomes. So we will denote these with a C for color blindness. So a red-green colorblind female would be XCXC. Red-green colorblind male would be XCY. And a carrier female would be XCX. Now that female will have no problem seeing any type of color, but she will carry that one copy of the X chromosome with a greater chance of passing that on to her son. Hemophilia is another type of sex-linked trait. Hemophilia is a blood disorder. Because of a dysfunctional protein, the blood does not clot effectively. So there can be, and there are ranges of hemophilia from fairly mild to fairly severe. Female hemophiliac, just like red-green color blindness, we'll denote hemophilia with an H. So you would have an H on both X's. Carrier females will only have one H. And a male hemophiliac will have his X taken up by that H. And of course, normal folks would be plain XX or plain XY. Lots of traits in human inheritance are what we call polygenic. Poly means many, genic refers to genes. So this is an interaction of lots of different pairs of genes. Lots of common human traits are polygenic. For example, skin color. There are 3 genes that control skin color, and you can see that bell curve of traits there for the variety of the very, very light to the very, very dark, and all of the different varieties in between. Twin studies are used, and actually the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities has a twin research program where they take twins that for some reason were separated at birth and they are kind of reunited later in life. They try to give them certain tests to see, for example, if they have the same types of physical abilities, the same types of job interests, to see if, because identical twins have a little bit more identical genes than your average brother and sister. They're not completely clones of each other, but it helps scientists separate the genetics from environment, or what science likes to call nature, meaning the genes, versus nurture, which is the environment. So does it matter really does your DNA say absolutely everything about you? Or does it have to do with the way that you're raised and the environment that you're raised in? And basically from the Twin Studies program at the University of Minnesota, it's roughly showing that it is a little bit of both. Not only do your genes say who you are, but how you were brought up as well does have a little bit to do with how people turn out as adults. So this has been Chapter 11 on human inheritance and genetics for Part 2.